A guy with no biology background can cobble together a cancer vaccine in his living room.
I can just see a lot of the population relinquishing their mental processes to these devices. It's a bit of a prosthetic.
He wrote like this soliloquy on X. Oh, they're straight up lying and this is horrible.
One thing that isn't talked about enough is emotional intelligence and our response to things. That kind of information might be valuable in the future as a form of new media collection, memory collection.
This week on the Frontiers podcast, John and I are going to talk about some things that have been on our minds recently. The first are world models. How are they different from large language models? And why do companies like World Labs and AMI Labs think that they're the secret to make robots work in the real world? The second is the Rosie story. A data engineer in Sydney uses AlphaFold and ChatGPT to design a custom mRNA cancer vaccine for his dog, and it works. We get into exactly what he did and what this means for the future of personalized medicine. And finally, we talk about visions for the future. Why is it always so dystopian? Can't we tell better stories? Please enjoy the episode. Welcome to episode 6 of the Frontiers podcast. My name is Steve. I'm based in New York, focused on healthcare and incentives. I'm joined by my co-host, John.
Hey everyone, John here, technologist based in London.
And it's starting to feel like spring in London, I'm told.
Oh wow, we had a wonderful day the other day.
You guys have really been getting sun. I can't believe it.
I've been getting a lot of sun.
Wait till you move to California, man. Once you get to SF, you'll take it for granted.
Yeah.
You love a good advert, don't you? It just sticks in your memory forever.
Honestly, I've been sharing a lot of Honda's adverts. Maybe we've talked about them before.
Yeah, you love the Honda ones.
I just love it. Yeah. When an advert is well made, it's less of it's not annoying. It's not there to persuade you really of anything other than an idea, just to convey an idea. It's storytelling. But I guess most advertisements are not really. Maybe the teams don't have the budget to think as creatively as this, or they're not brave enough. And most companies are also not as idealistic as the ones that put out that type of content. But I find it a great ad. Yeah, it does stick. Does it? Like it's just Apple was great at this, right? Back in the day, the thinking one that stands out, like the original. I still remember a lot of that. Yeah, they changed the world for a moment in time, didn't they?
Yeah, that's true. I always thought it was funny, the archetype of the PC guy and the Mac guy. You remember that? And the PC guy was this square who had like a financial calculator, and then there was like the Mac guy who was this creative type urban character, and there were just these two archetypes, and it was like, oh, like I don't even remember what the point of the ad was. I think it was just
I
showing
think
that
it
the
was just like
creative guy was cooler.
love to bash Microsoft so hard. Like in every interview that you watch with Steve, I listened to his Stanford speech the other day. He's got this really famous commencement speech from 2005. And right at the start of that conversation, I used to attend these calligraphy classes when I was in college. And if it wasn't for that, no computer, we wouldn't have had like fancy typography, Mac. And if we didn't have that, then nobody would have that because Windows just ended up copying the Mac. And he just loves it. Like he has to insert this like everywhere that
Yeah.
it's incredible.
But
What a
yeah,
thing.
the adverts were good. What did you think about the Anthropic adverts on the Super Bowl? Did you watch those?
Yeah, I saw those. Yeah.
What did you
Yeah,
think?
that was well played. Definitely. I think even Sam Altman just had to give like a GG to that one because
He was so upset. He wrote like this soliloquy on X. Oh, they're straight up lying and this is horrible. I'm like, wow, this is having the intended effect. It's got you going, guy. This obviously struck a nerve.
whoever they've hired at Anthropic, both in the design teams and marketing teams, they're doing a wonderful job, honestly. And it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, but it feels like more and more people are becoming aware of Anthropic and Claude as an alternative to ChatGPT. And there was also a lot of conversation recently about OpenAI's strategy in general and then trying to do too much. You might have seen this on Twitter as well, but I found that quite interesting. They're basically saying they're going to cut down a lot of their efforts and focus just on coding. And I think it was coding and enterprise. I guess enterprise can mean many things, but yeah. Yeah, I just find this whole like the strategy and where the field is going now seems to be quite driven by like the gains that we've seen in coding, and yeah, everyone's now trying to fight for that.
I'm happy to go into world models. I guess we'll have to start with first principles on this one because I'm not super familiar with what a world model even is or what that means. How is that different from a large language model? Is that a different thing? So curious for you to teach us.
Yeah, I have a lot of reading that I want to be doing on this topic as well, because it's a new word, a new term that's not new in the in computing history, computing literature. It's a concept that has been around for quite some time, but I think new to this modern day of AI, people have only recently started to talk about it, or at least that I've seen in more like popular channels anyway. But yeah, essentially a language model is built to model words and sequences of text, and that's all it's designed to do. The way in which they train these models, many people are probably now familiar with how they do it, is take some massive piece of data, some corpus of text, and break it up into words or bits of words, and then train this model to predict the next word that sort of is likely to appear after a certain sequence. And that's all it's really designed for. And just incredibly give it enough data, and you start getting all these what we call like emergent phenomena, all these abilities for these models to do all sorts of things, from understand the sciences or be able to do addition or reason about certain things, which is crazy in and of itself. But essentially what they're really doing is modeling language. Whereas world models, really what they're designed to do is understand like cause and effect in the real world, given a certain environment and the dynamics of that environment, and then an action that this robot or whatever agent is in this world, to be able to predict how the world will then change following that. So, current state of the world plus an action, how does that impact a new state of the world? So it's beyond just text. And some people were saying that, oh, all we need in the future is just to keep scaling up these language models, and we'll be able to embed them in like a robot, and that will be its brain, and we'll just be able to yeah, we'll be able to reach like AGI and have embodied intelligence just with these language models. But I think you intuitively, lay people may not be able to understand that it's very difficult to reason about how things happen in the world. Like, why do I pick up a glass in the way that I do, and how would I be able to go about explaining that to someone, give you certain instructions on how to pick up the glass, like very precisely. And so we need other kind of sensory information. We need visual information, we need audio information, we need information about where the glass is relative to us and where it is on the table. And all of that comprises what we call like basically the state of the world. And then only then, once we have a full understanding of the environment that we're in, can we take some action within it, and then we have an effect on the world. So the world models are trying to, in short, just to finish this off, is essentially learn how to model the world instead of model just language.
Okay. Can I just summarize what you said back so you
Yeah.
can confirm my understanding? So, the way I understand it is the LLM is basically it's a crude tool where we
Mm.
chuck a bunch of text, all of human written text, basically, the common crawl, Reddit, WikiHow, the Iliad, whatever. We chucked it all at these models and we said, okay, now I want you to predict the next token. I write a string of text and it's like autocomplete, right? And in doing so, the models have converged on meaning. They've converged on the meaning of what is a cup or what is a plate or what is the weather. And it seems to like understand the meaning of things by way of language, right? So it's taken our language tools and it's taken the objective we've given it of predicting the next token, and in doing so, as a means to that end, has to learn, appears to be converging on the meaning of things, or think that it understands meaning. And then
Mm.
in doing so, it can also like interact with us and talk to us, solve problems, and do real work, etc. And so
Mm.
that's one way of building an AI model. And then the other way, so this new world model, as you call it, is this Tycho Brahe and Copernicus, like back during the Enlightenment, during the Renaissance, like predicting the movement of celestial bodies? That's basically a very early version of a world model, right? It's, hey, the sun and these celestial bodies are going to move by X degrees, by X amount in the sky every so often. And then if you can predict that with some level of precision, then that's a world model. It's a very proto version of a world model, right?
Yeah, exactly. One version of a world model, if we think about the physical world, would be like being able to understand the physics of the environment that we live in. And then a robot or any other agent within this environment would understand if I take a certain action, like if I have an object in my hand and I drop it, what will happen next? It's going to fall to the ground. And following that, then I can predict what I should do several steps ahead of time in order to achieve whatever goal I might want to achieve or this robot might want to achieve. For example, it might want to load the dishwasher. So at that point, it should know that, okay, I've got this item on the table that I need to carry over to the dishwasher. I shouldn't let go until I get to the dishwasher. And that's really baked within that intelligence is an understanding of the world and that we live in and the physics of that world and how things interact with each other. So yes, a world model is trying to essentially boil down. I guess the techniques that we're building is to try and boil that down into a sort of a condensed form of intelligence where the system understands like everything that's happening around it and how to behave. So yeah, but worlds could be all sorts of things.
Okay, so the world, as you define it, is like context specific, right? So it could be like
Like,
a weather model or like weather forecasting famously is very complex, right? So weather forecasting or all these like meteorological models, these are types of world models as well.
interesting. I think depending on how they're built, yes, I guess so. Like for example, yeah, if you were trying to model the entire like dynamics of the weather, and then we could model that, and then you were able to ask questions like, if I did this, like how would the weather system change? For example, I don't know, a butterfly effect. If I injected a little
Yeah.
bit piece of this type of weather here, or I blew in this direction, this is how the world changed. I guess that would be in a very specific way a world model of the weather, that is. So yeah, I think that that makes sense to me. I'd have to look up
But do I
actually.
have it right then, John, that so the world model can be for a big complex system, which we don't quite know the parameters of and we're not able to reliably forecast, but it could also be for a smaller discrete system, like your use case is like a robot opening the dishwasher. Like it's a much smaller scale, like just it's very clear where the boundary of that problem ends, and it's maybe a far less complex system.
I think actually that specific example of the robot loading dishwasher is actually still quite complex because you'd have to obviously this robot is not going to be operating in a sort of an isolated environment. There could be other things that in the real world it's going to be in a kitchen, and there may be other humans that are in the kitchen as well, or other dynamic objects. So it's not just it doesn't just need an understanding of the dishwasher and things that go into the dishwasher. If it's able, if it's going to be useful to all of us and operate in the real world, it needs like really entire what people are calling like spatial intelligence, really, an understanding of the world around us, 3D environment, what things look like, what things are in that world. And then it needs to understand, okay, given the world that I see around me and the sounds that I can also perceive, how does my next action change the environment? And then it can simulate like an entire future. And we did this like all intuitively, right? In the past, let's take like the example of gravity we were talking about before, like dropping something to the floor. You might have had like old engines, like maybe even in game engines, where a lot of these formulas would have had to be like baked into the actual computer in order to actually simulate that kind of behavior. The idea of what we're working towards now in this whole like big data environment and like the same way we do language models is like hopefully we can take enough data about around us or about the world and just learn from it implicitly like all of these relationships and interactions. So that's what people are trying to do. And humans grow up and we intuitively just get the physics of the world, right? Because we interact with it in all sorts of ways. Like we don't have the equations of gravity and everything else etched into our minds. We just learn through like empirically interacting with the world.
Yeah, we have our own set of heuristics about maybe I think most people probably don't remember off the top of their head that gravity accelerates at 9.8 meters per second squared or whatever, but I think people have a rough understanding that, oh, if I drop something, it's going to accelerate at this
Yeah.
speed, or I don't know,
Yeah.
if I drop a glass 2 inches off the ground, it probably won't break. If I drop a glass 3 feet off the ground, it may very likely break. And if I drop it from the top of a building, it's certainly going to break. And we just intuitively know that. So we have
Mhm.
all these heuristics for
Mhm.
force and speed and like basic
Yeah.
laws of physics, but we don't know that we know it, but we know it because it's etched into a different part of the
Mhm.
brain. That's
That's
interesting. Okay.
an example actually that you just gave there. We can make predictions about like the height in which we drop certain things, even like jumping off a certain height. Maybe the people that do parkour are making these like evaluations all the time when they're
Like in
jumping.
a split second, if I do it from this height, if I get this wrong, then I can really hurt myself. And
Right. And what we're trying to do is build a system that can also intuitively respond dynamically, which is really crazy to think about. Like I said, up until now, we're trying to really codify all of this stuff. Now we're moving towards a paradigm of like, hopefully we can teach these agents to imitate the way in which we interface with the world. With enough data, they would also learn to like implicitly understand these interactions and these subtleties. If I move this cup 50 centimeters higher, it's going to drop because it's made of this material and it will hit. And the floor is concrete instead of like soft, plushy material. So there's a lot of information that we take in and show like how fascinating our brain is, right? It's doing all of these calculations in real time, taking information from our feet and the way in which they're interacting with the floor to like this item that we're holding and seeing, and then yeah, it's crunching all of that and telling us like what we should and shouldn't do next. Yeah, insane.
Yeah. So I guess this is interesting because it gets at, I think, Andre Karpathy's talking point that AI is like a digital brain. And so what we've been hearing and seeing in real time over the past, call it like 3-ish years, is with the advent of LLMs, is okay, the language part of our brain has
Mm,
been like mapped. And there's a certain like uneven cascade of things that the LLMs are better than us on, like demonstrably better. Then there's certain things that the LLMs are far worse than us on. But like that
yeah.
frontier is jagged and is changing all the time and is
Mm,
slowly encroaching our capability set. But this is very much in the language part of the brain. Now you're saying, okay, in the physical part of the brain, in like physical reality, this is labor work and this is like robotics and things like that, right? Now it's encroaching on those heuristics and that ability as well. And I think so. Do I have it right then that robotics basically needs world models, or that world models are basically
yeah,
just an
that's the
extension of
thinking.
like what's needed for robotics?
That's the thinking that we need some kind of system like this, some model like this, in order to simulate the world to essentially ensure that robots can intelligently function. And robots of all kinds, not just humanoids. Like they're talking about this in the context of self-driving cars and other sorts of automation. Anything that kind of will function in the real world environment or more a complex world where there are sort of multiple senses that the system has to take in, and there's
Mm-hmm.
also maybe like dynamic behavior, and
Hmm.
it needs to act and perturb and have some kind of cause and effect in that system to achieve its objective. Uh,
Yeah, and in many ways that's like infinitely more complex, right? Because you have, if it's language, there's probably only one dimension or two dimensions with which it's like navigating how to interact in real time. And then
mm,
in the real world, there's just an infinite number of dimensions that are alterable and that it's reacting to. And then there's this reflexivity where it reacts and then it changes the environment and then the environment and then how you, and then it's just recursive.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think that this is still like very early days research. There are probably some like primitive attempts at building world models. Actually, like you have a lot of companies now that are working on like video intelligence and generating video. You might have
Mhm.
seen examples like Genie from Google. These are really like early attempts at world modeling. Like the people working on video are hoping that just from video alone, you'd be able to collect enough information about how physical objects are interacting with the world just from seeing it, and you'll be able to generate a world model. And that's what some people are doing.
That's the full self-driving bit, right?
Yeah,
FSD
exactly.
is basically exactly
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's not clear how far we could go. We've seen with language models, right? If you just train on a sufficient text, you can, yeah, all these like incredible like intelligence of a certain kind emerges. Is that going to be the same with just video content, or do we need other things as well in order to drive at like this cause and effect, this system that's able to like operate in the world and understand like the impact of its own actions? Anyhow, but there's a few startups now that have raised quite a lot of money to chase this dream. One is called World Labs. It's headed by Fei Li. She's a prominent individual in the AI sphere and was a Stanford professor. I'm not sure if she still like operates at Stanford, but anyhow, raised about 1 billion or so to pursue the mission of like spatial intelligence is what she's going after. Then you have Jan LeCun as well, who's also yeah very big in the world of AI. Just left Meta, I think, to start his own lab called like Amy Labs, AMI Labs, and they're also like pursuing world models, but taking a slightly different direction. I don't know if it's just the algorithm, but whenever I'm on Twitter now, like I just see world model companies popping up left and center. And yeah, I just again don't know if it's just me and what X is deciding to show me, or if people are also just catching on that this is the next big thing and people need to get in on it. It's definitely one to pay attention to. I don't see anything coming anytime soon to like the real world. Maybe in 5 years we'll start to see something that is yeah really fascinating.
Yeah, that's interesting. So just to be clear though, like this is all upstream from the robots, right? Like, if the robots are going to come, and I hope that I would love to have a home robot that does all the chores and like functions like a nanny or a house cleaner, right? And so I think that day maybe it's 10, 15 years away, at least till it gets to like consumer applications and commercial scale and safety and everything. But when that day comes, that is the ultimate antidote to inflation of service provided sectors, right? The reason like healthcare is so expensive now, the reason like you have some sectors of the economy which are incredibly
Mm.
sclerotic in terms of like productivity gains. The robots are the antidote to all that, right? And so everything that we think we know about the cost of everything from like service at a restaurant to what is inflation going to be like on a long-term basis to what are people's retirements going to look like when I'm old, when I'm in my 70s and 80s, that will all be dramatically different once robots are part of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually crazy to learn more about the robotics research and where it is today. I was just speaking to my professor the other day my professor Imperial that I studied under. I did a 1 year computer science course there as like a master's program, and as part of that, did a robotics project. We were trying to teach a robot how to play fetch, and it's it requires so much like human engineering in order to get a robot to do this, by which I mean the way in which we had to solve it at that time. And I'm sure that this was not like cutting edge research work. This was just like what we could understand as master students. But we would stick a QR code on the object that we wanted the robot to perceive and to locate. And then you'd have to solve like how it would move its arm in order to be able to position it so that it could like pick it up with the gripper. And it was like you had to solve a series of like physical equations to do that. And there were algorithms that would help you do that. But the point is, like, someone had essentially signed these kinematics equations, and we only did that for one body part at a time. Like the robot wasn't moving in its entirety. It would walk up to this or roll up to this at the time, up to this object, stop, identify it with its eyes, and then send a signal to its arm to move it. And it was all like as you'd imagine from like the robot dance, like just doing one thing at a time with all its limbs separately. And I caught up with him after 8 years and was like, hey, what's the state of robotics? He's like, oh, yeah, now we've got full body locomotion, by which they mean we can coordinate all the separate limbs at like kind of the same time. I was like, oh, wow, it's only just now that we're moving into this world. And I think what these world models open up is like basically getting rid of all of this like what we call in like the machine learning or feature engineering is our attempt as humans to like encode like specific instructions and just to let the system like naturally understand through like pattern matching over all of this data how to do things. And I
Right.
think yeah, without that, I don't know. I think building like sophisticated robots will probably be quite hard. Who knows though? Sort of the domain of AI is like there's so many open questions on like how do we get to like intelligence and general intelligence and banking on this like big data paradigm that's just collect enough data about the universe so then it can just learn from all of this data. But I think there are also like different approaches as well that people are trying to test, especially in like academic environments where they really don't have access to a lot of the computation and funding that you need to to pursue that direction.
Yeah.
Anyhow, yeah.
That's interesting.
But
It does get it's funny because when you first started talking about the world models, the where my mind went wasn't immediately the robotics. It was rather thinking about
Minecraft.
if you yeah, Minecraft for sure, like building things with blocks.
Yeah.
But no, if you could model the world, weather patterns, movement of ships, movement of planes, movement
Mm,
of celestial bodies, it gets pretty philosophical pretty quickly because to the extent that you think the universe that we inhabit is deterministic in nature to the point where it could be modeled and forecasted, and then you go down to this deep rabbit hole of
mm,
simulations and if we can predict everything that's going to happen, does it create this sort of doom loop where we try to make some of those predictions not happen, and then does it recursively affect the model? And I don't know. It seems far-fetched and very sci-fi,
yeah.
but it does beg the question, right? They can't even seem to get a weather forecast for 3 days out here in New York City. So I don't know if you can't solve weather. It's a very complex system, but if you can
Well,
solve geopolitics a few election cycles ahead, I don't know. Anything that gives you an edge.
there's actually a company that came out called Simile. I think it's Simile AI, and they're working on simulation software using LLMs and AI agents for this. I think one of the applications might be in politics. I don't know, but I'm sure they're thinking about it. Yeah, AI is being applied all over the place with some kind of negative consequences, I think, as well. I think it has led to a little bit of fatigue, maybe in the consumer's mind, but certainly like professionals' minds as well, like knowledge workers who are constantly hearing like that AI is going to take their jobs, and then you constantly hear about these new companies and oh, AI for this, AI for that, and no occupation feels, no professional kind of feels safe. Is the sentiment that I'm hearing.
Yeah, we've had this. Yeah, this debate has gotten really stale. I think it's always the same like lump of
Mm,
labor fallacy, right? This goes back to like, an old Marxist fallacy, which is that there's a fixed amount of work to be done in the world, and if machines are able to do that work, then there's going to be no work left for everyone, and then people will be without anything to do. And of course, this is like totally backwards view of how the economy works, right? The economy is
mm,
like more using technologies to improve productivity, and then that productivity makes prices go down, and then we're all richer because of that. And
mm,
new enterprises get formed, capital and labor form new enterprises. There's new goods and services which we didn't predict before, which creates demand for new jobs, and then there's
mm.
new tasks that get replaced, but new tasks that crop up, which are require a higher level of cognitive functioning that machines don't have. And then I keep hearing, oh, it's different this time
Yeah.
because AI is a general purpose technology. And I don't want to dismiss the neo-Luddites. The neo-Luddites are saying before you had the plow, and then, okay, that's great. Now we don't need to tow the fields anymore. And then you
Yeah.
have a patch-based system where you have automatic routing for telephones, so you don't need telephone operators. And then we had automatic teller machines, so you don't need bank tellers anymore. There's all these like specific instances where like the machine does one thing, but now the machine's doing many things. And because it's general purpose, that's like scary to people. But
Mm.
I don't know, electricity was general purpose, and I think it gave us all much more work and better work. And the next
Feels
one is
like
probably computers and then the internet.
no, I think one of the things that I think about, I was thinking about, especially in the context of world models, just to jump back a little bit, was one of the applications anyway, and it links to the movie, animation movie that I saw, which was Arco, mentioned it right at the start. I thought it was actually like a really interesting application to you be able to create immersive worlds for students to, yeah, jump into, engage with, in order to really learn about the environment firsthand about what's going on. I remember when I was growing up, we had basically like CD-ROMs, right? That would be digital encyclopedias, and you'd be able to visit the Amazon rainforest and be able to click on different animals that were there and get some kind of information about frogs or whatever it was, or the weather that was fixed into like a little 2D screen. And now I hope we'll move beyond 2D screens, flat screens, but you'll be able to simulate that entire environment. And you have a child or whoever it is that is curious about learning about the Amazon who will literally be able to be there and poke and prod those things and be able to see that entire universe flourishing and dynamically moving. And I thought that would be just an incredible educational experience. But if you don't have any information about the particular en environment or situation that you want to model, for example, many of us haven't seen the inside of the sun. We have some equations that might, and some understanding of the sun to be able to model that. But if these we haven't, this world models haven't like actually absorbed any of that data, then how are we going to be able to simulate that? And there will be things that go beyond the reach of the data that we collected at the moment. I guess one job of humanity will be to be pioneers and continue to explore like the extents of the solar system, not to necessarily feed back into these models, but that data will then come back into these models, this AI that will then be able to like be disseminated and educate and be used for all sorts of things. So it seems to me that, well, until AI becomes creative and can come up with new mathematics and stuff like that, definitely one role for humanity that will remain is to be inventors and pioneers and explorers and continue to, yeah, go beyond the current horizons.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I do wonder, okay, if the LLM, to make the LLM, you have to feed it what? You have to feed it the common crawl. What is the
Yeah.
common crawl? It's all the text that we as humans have ever made. Okay, fine.
Mm.
For the world model, what are you feeding it?
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
it?
Where it come from. Yeah. YouTube videos at the moment.
Yeah, so it's just, it needs, I guess, real data about the physical world. It is interesting, I think, for
Where's that going to
educational
come from?
purposes.
That's going to come from Meta and the Ray-Ban glasses. And
Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, is it really? You have these GoPro farms now in India where 10,000 people wear a GoPro and fold laundry in a slightly different way. And so you've got hundreds of thousands of video hours of people folding laundry slightly differently. And then you feed it all the model, and they're, oh, yeah, the robot's totally going to learn how to fold laundry from these videos.
mm,
Maybe. I don't know. It seems really inefficient, but maybe that's the only way.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That seems to be one of the ways in which people are pursuing, yeah, just collecting huge data set of video content. And sometimes they're going out into the world and filming their own stuff. Like you see with
Mm,
like Waymo and the Wave, they basically have like autonomous vehicles Basically, yeah, we've become data farmers, data hoarders, data collectors for the
I
machine.
wouldn't mind that. You could connect the dots. You basically, hey, John, I'll give you a free tour, free holiday package to Rome. You can go
Mm,
see the Colosseum. You can go see all of the old Roman forums. You can go see all the tourist destinations, but you have to wear this backpack that films
mm.
it in high resolution on your front and back, and you have to give us all the data at the end.
Yeah, in the future, that'll be a machine instructing me, not a human.
Yeah,
Like,
and then as a reward, it will be like you can wear this VR headset
yeah,
and you can go to the Colosseum and we'll recreate a gladiator scene right there before your very eyes using the
I-
data that you helped train.
yeah. You know what? I can't see why that doesn't happen. Why that future doesn't happen. Yeah, totally see that already.
Yeah.
Obviously, not me like partaking in that kind of study. Maybe I will. Who knows? Maybe when I'm retired, I'll be like, I've got nothing else to do. Let me just go and take a submarine to the Mariana Trench. No one's been there before. I'll collect this data. High reward, high risk, high reward task. Yeah. Who knows?
I have often wondered if I'm like walking around Midtown Manhattan or if I'm like commuting into Midtown Manhattan, I take the subway. I don't know. Just that, my point of view of going down into the subway, going through the turnstile, getting on the train, it seems mundane, but that's got
Mm,
to be worth something now. In today's day and age, I must be able to just wear a GoPro all the time or the Meta glasses, and they
yeah.
should pay me for that. I should have that
Yeah.
data and I should just be filming it and charging for it.
Yeah, interesting. I think that data would be highly valuable, especially if they start to collect other things like your experiences loaded on top of that. So now you have a human individual plus them annotate like narrating their own experience and their emotion, and maybe they compare that with your emotional data, your
Mhm.
neurological data as well.
Like Steve is
How
feeling
the-
sad now. They ran out
yeah,
of croissants. Now
yeah.
mood goes down, right? And then it sees me walking out of the bakery.
It's not just an intelligence to understand the world, it's an intelligence to understand humanity. Maybe one thing that isn't talked about enough is emotional intelligence and our response to things. So, yeah, totally. Also, that kind of information might be valuable to individuals in the future as a form of new uh, media collection, memory collection. Like at the moment, we have cameras, our phones to take stills and also
Hmm.
short video clips. But recording your entire day was cheap, easy to do, convenient for you, and then you could search that effortlessly. I don't know, maybe people will just be capturing all this information, like because it would cost them nothing to do, and they'd have their
Yeah,
entire
the
life.
life loggers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about this that you have people who are like called life loggers where they log everything about their life or as much as they could. This is not a new thing. This is going on for like 10 years, but I
Yeah.
guess the tools are much more complex now. But like
Mm,
every meal that they eat, they would take a photo and store it somewhere.
mm,
Everything they did, they would write it down or they would collect data. They would basically like all their health data. They were the first, these were the early adopters on the wearable side. Like every
mm.
single bit of data about their daily life, they would capture. They're called
Yeah.
life loggers. And I guess now that's like just going to be a mainstream thing.
In real time. You won't have a device to do. You'll have something like the Meta Ray Bans or whatever it is that will just be automatically recording all the stuff. Who knows? Who knows? Sometimes it feels like the use cases for these kind of things seem absurd or it's hard to imagine what they might be. But maybe it's one of those things where once the technology is out, like all sorts of like interesting things start to emerge from it. But also like super dangerous in that kind of instance, right? Like ethical considerations and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah. The emotional data thing, you really got me thinking now because what I was reading the other day is an interesting thread where if a lot of relationship advice that
Mm.
Claude or GPT would give you, it's based on like Reddit forums. And a lot
Yeah.
of the Reddit forums, if you look at how they've trended over time,
Mm.
there's a certain selection bias in the people who would comment on Reddit forums. And so basically, for a lot of reasons, the people who would give, for example, like relationship advice on a Reddit forum, by and large, are going to tell you that if you're having difficulties with your girlfriend or fiance, you should break up with him or her. Right. So like the amount of advice on Reddit that's trended towards the solution to your whatever relationship problem being you should break up with this person has continued to trend up and to the right over time.
Mm.
Now, that's not to say that if you were to ask most people, right, that they would give you this advice. That it's not to say that is actually the correct answer to your life if you're optimizing for whatever long-term happiness or whatever. But that is what the AIs will tell you because they're reflecting the data they were trained on, which is the Reddit data. And I
Yeah.
just think it's funny because in economics, there's this study of what's called revealed preferences. What is this?
I don't know. No.
So a revealed preference is essentially there's what people say they do, and then there's what they actually do,
Mm,
right? So my favorite version of this is, oh, we need more independent bookstores, we need more independent coffee shops, and
mm,
whatever. We need more independent, I don't know, hardware stores on Main Street or whatever it is. But then when Walmart opens up, everyone goes to Walmart, right? And
mm,
so there's the stated preference, which is I
yeah,
would love to go to my local shop, and then there's the revealed preference, which is I
mm,
would like something cheap, fast, convenient,
yeah,
and oh, by the way, they have potato chips or whatever. They have everything I need in one stop, which is
yeah,
Walmart.
yeah.
And the numbers don't lie. People vote with their feet, they go to Walmart. And their economics is filled with these types of revealed preferences. But I say all that to say is with the LLMs, they're being trained on our stated preferences, and they're being trained on our stated values, not
Mm,
on our actual values. We
mm,
say that we value certain things more than other things. We often present a picture of ourselves and the picture of the things that we, if you ask me, oh, how would you spend, you have 24 hours in a day, eight of them you're asleep, and then the other 16, how would you spend your day? Oh, I'd work out, I'd eat well, I'd wake up and meditate, I'd be mindful, I'd spend time with my family. It's you're not actually doing that. Look at like time use surveys. That's junk. You should look at how actually people spend their time. And no one knows that better probably than Zuckerberg himself, who knows
mm,
that people spend 3 hours a day scrolling reels and they spend 2 hours a day on watching YouTube and they spend God knows how many hours doing other things that they probably wish they wouldn't have done. And so there's a
yeah,
huge disparity between the way people say they would spend their time and the way they do.
yeah.
There's a huge disparity between people, the way people actually conduct themselves in a relationship versus the advice that they would give. You see where I'm
Mm,
going with this. So
yeah,
everything the LLM is trained on is like what we say, which is different than what we do.
yeah.
So I wonder if you give it that conflicting data, how the output would change, the product would change.
That's such an excellent point. There are most certainly teams within these companies which are trying their best to stress test the LLMs, considering some of these scenarios, but they won't be capturing all of that. Just the human validator's time is just limited, impossible to do. Yeah, and obviously you're seeing it in some of the examples that you just brought up, right, with the dating advice and stuff like that, which is, I've not really thought about that, but in kind of those economic terms, like stated preference and real preference. But I'm so happy that you brought that up. It's starting.
Yeah, I'm not saying not to seek relationship advice or family advice or whatever from Claude. I'm just saying take it with a grain of salt because more often than not, the conclusion
Yeah.
from Claude or GPT will be, oh, if you have difficulty with a family member, you should cut them off or you should be estranged for you should like set clear boundaries between yourself and that family member. You should just avoid contact with that family member. You should break up with your husband, spouse, girlfriend, whatever. It's an interesting rabbit hole to go down.
The genie's out the bag, and
Yeah.
as much as we would like to encourage people to use critical thinking, I think it's the convenience of an easy answer. I think will dominate for quite a while. Yeah, unfortunately. A lot of that responsibility will need to fall on these companies that are building these models and testing them and regulating, and also regulate as well to try and make sure, yeah, we control some of the output that they generate. But yeah, I can just see a lot of the population relinquishing their mental processes to these devices. And it's a bit of a prosthetic, isn't it, really? And the more you rely on a prosthetic, the higher probability that they would just atrophy.
Yeah, I think it's not all horrible. The relationship advice anecdote is interesting precisely because there is a weird dynamic between people who give relationship advice and people who maybe are qualified to give relationship advice. Anyone can give it, and often the advice is unsolicited and it's given by people who you don't know. Are these people who have wonderful relationships with family and friends and built successful lives on the other
Mm,
end of the keyboard? I have no idea. It could
mm,
be some just really sad person who had a failed life and has burned bridges with many people, and they're giving me relationship advice on Reddit. We
mm,
don't know. Now, with other topics, I think there is a self-correction mechanism in that if you're a hobbyist and your hobby is, I don't know, cooking, guess what? Most of the people who comment on Reddit about cooking know cooking. And the stuff
Mm,
that gets upvoted and the stuff that gets more airtime and the substacks of recipes that people share or whatever about how to cook and how to, I don't know, sear scallops or something is probably vetted for the sole purpose of, oh yeah, I took this person's advice on searing scallops and I tried doing it. It worked really well. So it's a great big
mm,
upvote for me. And the people who produce content probably know some things about the domains that they're commenting on. So it's not the case for everything, but it's
yeah,
just the case for some things where certain topics people are commenting and they have no business commenting.
that makes sense. Yeah. I'm also curious now, like the level of curation that happens at these companies. Of course, we've hoovered up all of the data and the text data on the internet, but then what level of refinement is happening on this data to strip away maybe comments that are littered with certain unpopular opinions, even or hate speech or whatever, or if
Yeah.
they pay attention to engagement metrics. If you are taking from Reddit, are they using everything that's on Reddit or only the most popular stuff that's on Reddit? And I guess not, because there's so many biases that they need to be attentive to. But it is, I wish we had more transparency into what is really going into these systems beyond the publicly available data sets that we do know, because they've obviously collected their own proprietary data as well to train these systems on.
Yeah. I think curation is definitely the right word for it. You put your thumb on something very real, which is that the models, you've spent enough time with them where you realize there's a lot of subjectivity in
Yeah.
what the model's going to tell you, especially if you don't do the prompting. There was the video, I don't know if you saw this, the video of Bernie Sanders where he sits with Claude in a room. If you haven't seen it, it's so funny.
Real video.
It's literally the meme of, oh, the user goes to the computer and says, "Oh, tell me you're a scary robot." And the computer says, "I'm a scary robot." And then the
Mm,
person goes, "Oh my God, see, it's alive. It's scary." And
mm,
that's literally what Bernie Sanders does to Claude. He like opens Claude. Oh, what data do the LLMs collect on the American people? Why do they collect this data? Basically
mm.
is like giving it these leading
Yeah.
questions, which of course
I,
make it answer all of these dystopian statistics. So it paints like this very bleak, pessimistic picture, which reflects Bernie Sanders' worldview about modern American capitalism. And then
mm,
Claude gives him back exactly what he wants, which is this bleak, dystopian picture of American capitalism. I'm sure if Mark Andreessen had a parallel
mm,
conversation with Claude,
mm.
it would sound cheery and amazing. And wow, the US is incredibly dynamic, and American dynamism is unmatched in terms of its technological capabilities. And it would be like just the other side of the coin using the same medium.
I get that, yeah, one of the dangers is that I think prompting is so important still, right? Like you get what you put into these systems, the quality of the answers that you get back from them is reflective of the quality of the question that you asked or opinion that you get back. The bias of that opinion, the political skew of that opinion is all really, in most cases, reflective of your own input, which I guess for better or worse, it might end up causing even more division. Hopefully not. But we saw that with like social media, right? And filter bubbles. Filter bubbles?
Filter bubbles, yeah.
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 And this is like an echo chamber designed for you, supercharged.
But so that, yeah, that's where I'd actually push back though. I feel like it's the opposite. Maybe it'll change, but I will say like when I chat with Claude, I do feel like it pushes back on me a lot. Because
Oh,
there's a lot of like opinions that I would hold that I would,
mm,
and you could try if you could open up Claude and just be like, oh, the moon landing was fake or whatever. And then it will be like, actually, I don't think the I'm going to have to push back on that one. I don't think the moon landing was fake. And it will give you all of these people continue to believe that the moon landing was fake because of XYZ. But actually, if you look at blah, 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 and you can go down like this conspiracy theory rabbit hole,
yeah.
about the moon landings, and it will push back. And so I do
Right.
think that there's some light at the end of the tunnel there. The other thing
Yeah.
I would say is, and I read this the other day, I have to dig it up, but basically people are converging on a more common set of facts, which is new. It used to be that we had like the filter bubbles got so bad at one point where we were like we lived in our alternative universes of our own like facts, not just like value judgments about the world. If you said, "Oh, I don't know, the crime for stealing a candy bar should be a $200 fine," or the crime for stealing a candy bar should be 10 years in prison. And then most people, you can't prove that's just a value judgment. That's just, oh, I either you believe that's your moral value or not, right? But the LLM would actually give you like good statistics of, oh, how many petty thefts have happened in New York City in the past year, and how has that data trended over the past 10 years or whatever. And I do think that there's a lot of evidence to suggest more of us now have a common set of facts. And the way
Mm.
debate has happened, and some of this is thanks to, I think, just like the way media and politics have merged together. But like debate is now much more like entertaining. It's much more, oh, I'm going to get the soundbite, I'm going to prove you wrong type of thing. The, there's a lot of bad things about that. The good thing about that is that you can't just make things up as easily anymore because it very quickly gets fact checked. And so if you're ever in the live debate setting, if you say, oh, GDP growth last year was 4%, someone can immediately fire back, oh, actually, most of that growth was just created by the
Mm.
public sector. So that's not, or you can't just adjust that number. And so really quickly in real time, there's a feedback loop that's happening. Maybe it's just me being optimistic, but I hope
That's
that,
great.
and there's some evidence to suggest that we may be converging on at least a common set of facts along certain things more so than happened in the previous bubble, which I'd say is very social media and like
Mm.
search engine driven. Maybe the LLMs will bring us to a better place.
Yeah. Perhaps. I hope so. I buy your optimistic view and I wish it to be true. I generally try to wear an optimistic hat anyway. On a more whimsical point, I don't think we've got like a company which is quite yet a verb, right? Back in the day, this would have been fact checking would have been Google it. But is there an LLM company that's, yeah, just Claude it or ChatGPT it? Do people say ChatGPT it? Maybe they do.
No, it hasn't been elevated to verb status just yet.
Yeah.
I'm sure that will happen. ChatGPT it. I'm sure
Yeah.
that'll come at some point.
Doesn't quite have the same ring to it, but who knows?
No.
Yeah. I don't
You
think
ever
this,
met someone who says, "Oh, can you Xerox that?"
no, never.
No. Okay, that's something that people used to say. So if you ever talk
Yeah.
to someone like over the age of 60, well, over the
Yeah.
age of 70 now, like I remember I had teachers in high school who would say that, "Oh, can you Xerox this?"
Oh, that's interesting. No, I don't think I've ever had to Xerox anything or been on the receiving end of a Xerox.
To be clear to everyone listening, like Xerox means to photocopy, right? Because Xerox was like one of the first photocopy machines. So to Xerox something is to photocopy it.
In which case, yeah, I have been on the receiving end of a photocopy, or I have done a photocopy, but not a Xerox machine, or not that I'm aware it's a Xerox machine. Interesting.
Could be, you just don't know.
Could be. Yeah, I don't know. Don't know. Anyhow, where to point the spotlight to next?
There's another story that broke a couple weeks ago, which I think is it's one of the most important things that I've seen in recent memory. And it starts with this data engineer in Sydney, this guy named Paul Cunningham. I don't know if you saw this story. He's
Yeah,
like a machine learning guy, right? Like tech
yeah.
guy, no biomedical background, whatever. And then I think like in 2019, he adopts a dog. And then the dog gets cancer. There's these aggressive tumors that start appearing on her leg. It's like a mast cell cancer, so it's a common skin cancer in dogs, and it's there's no cure for that. And so he does everything the vets tell him. He does multiple surgeries, chemo, immunotherapy. The chemo slows it down, but it doesn't shrink the tumors. And the vets basically tell him, like, look, your dog is, I don't know, like 6 months to live or something. And so, like, most people would just be like, all right, it's very sad. I love this animal, but it's probably getting close to time to say goodbye. Instead, this dude opens up like GPT because he's a data guy and he just tries to treat this as like a data problem. And he spends like $3,000 to get Rosie's healthy DNA and her tumor DNA sequenced at the University of New South Wales. And then he
Mm,
uses ChatGPT as like a research assistant and it helps him plan the whole pipeline. So he sequences the DNA, he compares the healthy cells to tumor cells, and then he identifies the mutations driving the cancer. And then he uses DeepMind's AlphaFold, which is this modeling tool that helps model 3D protein structures to figure out the shape of the mutated proteins in Rosie's tumor. And then he identifies like which proteins to target. And he basically designs a custom mRNA cancer vaccine from first principles. It's the same underlying technology as like the COVID vaccines, but he uses it to do his dog's specific cancer
mm,
mutations. And then he partners with these researchers at the University of New South Wales RNA Institute to actually build the mRNA nanoparticles. And
mm.
then a vet at the University of Queensland administers it. And then he had to drive like 10 hours to give Rosie her first injection because finding someone with the right ethics approvals was very difficult. Anyway, long story short, within about a month, Rosie's tumor shrank by 75%. The shiny coat comes back. She's jumping over fences, chasing rabbits. It was basically this miracle story where the dog had been cured, and there's some debate online as to whether she's been cured, but things got noticeably better and the tumors went in the other direction. Story goes totally viral, gets millions of views, and basically the simplistic framing that is communicated, I think, to the broader public is that one man with a GPT chatbot just outperformed the entire pharmaceutical industry. And people are posting these breakdowns on X, and you can feel the energy behind this, right? People are obviously amazed, and it's a cute story, right? Guy and his dog. But the implication is obvious, right? If a guy with no biology background can cobble together a cancer vaccine in his living room using publicly available AI tools, why are we spending tens of billions of dollars on pharma R&D? Right? Why are people dying of cancer while the technology to potentially help them exists and is accessible to anyone with an internet connection and 3,000 bucks? And so then there was like this cartoon that was circulating. And then remember there was this cartoon during the COVID pandemic of this guy who's like using the internet and he's, honey, look, I found some information all the world's top scientists and doctors missed, right? And this cartoon was originally made to mock the anti-vaxxers and the conspiracy theorists. And people are now posting it unironically, saying this guy with a computer literally did it, right? The meme flips around. Obviously, the pushback is that a researcher, someone who actually works in the space, is look, I don't want to be a downer because this is impressive in some ways. You have a
Mm,
single mRNA vaccine is actually not that hard. It's almost trivially easy if you have the antigen. You can cure mice of specific types of cancers using these therapeutics all the time. You can make mice lose more weight in tirzepatide. Making something work once and in animals is the easy part. What's hard is proving it's safe and effective in a randomized controlled trial in humans and then manufacturing that at scale. That's actually the hard part because you got to do the clinical trials. So it's not to dismiss this story, but people are saying, okay, maybe this is overhyped. But then the provocative question comes out. Okay, you have an individualized cancer vaccine, which apparently are trivially easy to make, but can never be used in people because you can't run a clinical trial with a sample size of one. Isn't that a gigantic regulatory failure? Right. And
mm,
then it gets down this rabbit hole of the ethical calculus in humans is just fundamentally different. But then it begs the question of, okay, if you have a 55-year-old human who has a terminal cancer and is likely going to be killed by the cancer itself or by some combination of the chemo and the treatments and everything else, like, why not try? Why
mm.
not try to do N of one customized mRNA vaccine? And why doesn't the regulatory infrastructure allow for that? So
Yeah.
anyway, super interesting story. I think the story itself is interesting, but the debate of wildfire, which has been now spread, is super important. And we have to have this debate if we're going to make any advancement, I think, in like the world of personalized medicines in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, there's so many things to take away from the story. Obviously, a lot of what you just mentioned, personalized medicine, the igniting talks around like regulatory frameworks and ethical considerations. What I'm not quite sure of, and I didn't get a chance to dive really deep into what this man actually did, but you might know. So, did he actually innovate or come up with something new, or it sounds like more he was just showed a lot of determination to stitch a lot of different already well-known steps together in order to arrive at this, yeah, hyper-personalized medicine for his dog. But he didn't. Yeah, I don't know if there was any kind of invention or innovation that or new discovery that emerged from this that allowed him to do that with
No,
ChatGPT.
this is existing tech. This is off the shelf. It's amazing tech, right? And
Yeah.
this is the big pushback of the simplistic framing of like the comic book argument, right? He's not outsmarting the scientists, right? He's using the tools that science
Yeah.
has built, right? AlphaFold exists because Google DeepMind spent hundreds of millions every year developing it. And the mRNA vaccine platform, same thing because of like decades of academic research, also
Mm.
that produced COVID vaccine. So this is not man versus the establishment, but it is interesting because he uses these off-the-shelf tools, right? It's like ChatGPT is the research assistant, and AlphaFold is the protein folding prediction platform model, and mRNA is the conduit through which this actually works in the physical world. And he also has to pay the university research assistants to carry out the vaccine and administer it. And There's another anecdote where he has to get like ethics committee approval from the Australian regulators, which I guess requires him. That was the most lengthy part of this whole thing. He had to spend like 3 months, I think it was, like working extra hours every night. So he would finish a day of work, and then he would come home and he would type up, add 2 or 3 more pages to this eventually like 100+ page submission to the government about why they should let him do this to get the ethics committee approval. And that was like
Mm.
the lengthiest part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was dedicated. But no, to answer your question, no, like all the tools he used, insofar as I understand it, were off the shelf.
Yeah, I get. But the amazing thing here is with ChatGPT as this research system is that no, he on his own he probably would never have pieced together all the information across the web in such a way, and I can't imagine he would have easily access like expert advice. Like it already depicts in the story like how difficult it was for him to get researchers on board. So to also be asking them like, what should I be doing? It's effectively asking them to do the research for him would have been impossible. So like ChatGPT just lowered the bar incredibly for one man to be able to level up their understanding of biology for the specific in this specific instance, and to have hypothesis on what to do next, and they could explore on their own. And it feels like there's a couple of business ideas that are definitely like worth pursuing that come out of this story. Just a ton of them probably, but just lowering the barriers to like access like regulation, or also is there a way in which you could scale up like research lab time for more people in some way? Yeah, and God knows where like personalized medicine goes as well. I'm sure that's like big business. Yeah, but incredibly encouraging.
Yeah.
Literally
Yeah.
with
No,
enough.
it's really fascinating. With enough sheer force of will, you can take these Lego bricks, if you will, that have been built by the institutions
Yeah.
and like these incredible research organizations, incredible products of decades of expert research and billions in investment. You can take these Lego bricks and you can use them to build something that no one who had built the Lego bricks themselves envisioned. The frontier of application now extends beyond the people who built the tools, which means that the frontier basically is unwritten. We don't know just how far you can take this.
It's really like exhilarating to think about now. Like when I ponder on the story and I think about what does a relationship look like between a scientist of whatever kind and an AI assistant, and what role is the AI system playing in coming up with hypotheses and original ideas, and how much of that still remains like with the scientist to ask the right questions, probe or whatever, and the AI is really more so just acting as this data engine, this data research and synthesis engine instead. There's this essay that read recently called Man-Computer Symbiosis. It was written in the 60s by this man called Licklider, J.C. Licklider. And there's actually a good book about him called Dream Machine that was published by Stripe. I can't remember where he was or when he wrote this, but he talked about a period in time where man and machine would be both like sophisticated, they would communicate in the same language, and each of them would lean into their own unique strengths. And that point would be a period of like incredible human flourishing and excitement. And it feels like with this story, like that kind of hinted at possibilities of what a future might look like where man and computer are combining their strengths. So this man is asking questions, trying to find out information, and ChatGPT is responding and collecting data and giving answers. And we're still probably like in the primitive stage of this technology relative to what it could become. Yeah, I don't know, very exciting. My kind of pulse is racing a little bit, like thinking about, okay, wow, what really is possible? Not just with science, like science is exciting as well, but also in other kind of yeah, other kind of areas of the world and work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a weird world that we're heading into, but it does seem like this was a bright spot that
Mm.
it's almost like a Pandora's box type moment. Once we had this story, it's not going away. And now it's begged. I would be shocked if new businesses don't come out of at least partially informed by this idea or by what has happened here and just say, look, okay, can you do that? This guy is now getting inundated with everything
Mm.
from like interview requests to, oh,
Mm.
can you help do it for my dog? And now there's a backlog of people who want him to help cure their dog's cancer. That alone could be spun out into something and you could maybe productize what happened. But I think obviously the bigger question is, can Can you
scale.
replicate this type of success in humans, even if you can only do it once? Even in some very narrow, weird circumstance where it's like the trade-off is so horrible and the person's basically on death row anyway. But like, even if you did it one time, just imagine how compelling that would be. mRNA cancer vaccines have been talked about for the past, I don't know, 5 years. I've heard about it since COVID. But
Right.
to really see that be personalized and have it work in a human and have a pathway, ethical or legal frameworks or otherwise, devised for at least some corner cases of cancer where that can be applied, it would be insane. It would be insane because the only way that cascade moves is forward. And you could do it for one, two corner cases at first, and then it could be rolled out for certain types of relapsed and refractory patients then, and then you could have entire types of cancers you could imagine in the future where it's, oh, if you have this specific type of cancer, this specific mutation, there's a personalized mRNA-based treatment that you
Mm.
could do. You could definitely imagine that's the
Mm.
sort of cascade this follows within our lifetime. So it's yeah, it's really crazy to think about that we may very well, after all, be winning the war on cancer. It's really amazing.
Yeah, this has definitely ignited a spark. Let's hope, fingers crossed. We
Yep.
need stories like this to continue to propagate across the world. There was actually, I don't know if we talked about this before, but I had there's a feeling in the air, that personal feeling in the air that a lot of the narratives, a lot of the stories around like technology in the future often focus on like dystopian worlds and dark side of humanity,
Mm.
how we abuse the technology. Like a lot of the ones that come to mind anyway, Ex Machina or Black Mirror or Terminator, whatever it is. Like
The
there are
population bomb.
yeah, there are very few examples, and I'm sure if I searched harder, but they're just not as either popular or well known. So I haven't come across them, but not so many like popular examples of famous examples of like positive imaginations of the future. I don't know if maybe you can think of some like media or stories or what narratives that you've seen. But this story certainly fits that. And I think there's this entrepreneur in the US called Peter Diamandis. I think he wrote a couple of books like Bold or Abundance. Anyway, he started this organization called XPRIZE. It was an award to encourage like certain scientific pursuits. Recently put up like $3 million, I think it was, to award storytellers funding to promote positive visions of the future, which I thought was cool, like very much needed. Yeah, for me, this story ties in so strongly with that. But yeah, I don't know. Can you think of any like real like stories of the future or that have excited you that come to mind readily? I think it's really hard, right?
It is really hard because all the classics, it's The Time Machine,
Mhm.
1984,
Yeah,
Brave New World, right? It's always dystopian. It's always dystopian, but yeah, is there any I don't know if there's any positive ones. And the ironic thing is,
Back to
a
the
lot of
Future.
the stories of yesteryear, right? Stories of the medieval times, stories of pre-agrarian times, stories of whatever, the Roman Empire, ancient China, they are romanticized. Is that
Mm,
these
yeah,
historical time periods are always romanticized, always this idyllic time period in medieval England, or it's these
yeah,
medieval fantasies in medieval Europe,
yeah,
and it's ancient China was so beautiful. And
yeah,
don't get me wrong, I'm sure all those time periods had some aesthetic quality to them, which were fascinating. And I'm sure it would have been amazing to visit Chang'an at the time of the
yeah,
Tang Dynasty. I'm sure it would have been just a time of cultural flourishing and ferment. But let's be absolutely clear. You do not want to go back to any of these time periods. You will not have a good time,
yeah,
even if you are the wealthiest and richest and most powerful person at any
that,
of these time periods. You will get sick. You will die early. Infant mortality was way higher than it is now. People died during childbirth. It was just a horrible, nasty, horrible time. You didn't want to live back then. And yeah, every single time when we as humans create stories, it's always the same arc. The future is grim. The past
yeah,
was amazing. We're going down the tubes. And I
yeah.
think this gets at a part of human psychology, which is the
So true.
same exact reason that the
Mm,
vast majority of news stories are negative. It's, I don't know how you call that. Like the human brain is always looking for like threats. It's like our fight or flight response. It's baked into us, right? And so
mm,
there's a saying in journalism, like if it bleeds, it leads, right? You
Mm.
want to have some news story that tells you how many people have been killed, and this morbid curiosity gets into like the type 1, type 2 error, right? We want to respond to threats on our horizon, and as that's how we evolved evolutionarily, is to always scan the horizon for threats. And we're not looking for those good stories. And so the same thing happens with science fiction. We're
Yeah.
not writing utopian science fiction because that's just not as exciting, right? If I
Mm.
told you I wrote, hey, John, you wake up, the year is 2100, you're never getting cancer, you're never getting any chronic disease, your children are beautiful and happy and amazing, and we have world peace. You're going to put down the book because there's no conflict. That's not interesting.
You're so true. The only book that I have read that is exactly that future was also a dystopian book. It was called The Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect, where it basically invented AGI and it solved all humanity's problems. And humans are just bored out of their minds, and they just invented blood sports so they could, like, yeah, attempt to kill themselves, although the AI would stop them and prevent them from killing themselves, like at that point. So that was the only thing that was left for humanity to do. Yeah, not the brightest future. But it is a reflection of the human experience, right? Like most of us are anxious about the future, nostalgic or regretful about the past, and not present in the day to day.
And it's horrible too because even on our own personal lives, I think
What I
maybe
mean,
at some point like inverts, but when you're like five
yeah,
years old, you think that you're going to be like an astronaut, or you think you're going to be a fireman, or you think you're going to be a, I don't know, a cowboy. And you always have big expectations for yourself when you're 5 years old. And then at some point, I don't know, at some point people they think the future is going to be grim for them. They think, oh, it's going to be harder, the world's going to get worse. But then you
mm,
get there and you're like, actually, things are not that bad. Actually, life's a lot better than I would have expected it to be. If you would have told 5-year-old Steve that Steve now would be in this current life and recount my life, I probably wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have believed it. I'm as happy now as I am, as I would have thought I would have been. You think, oh, after my youth is over, then it's just downhill from there. But that's not
mm,
what happens, right? And the same thing happens at a societal level is okay, paint me a picture of what the United States is going to be like in 2050. And almost every person you would query will tell you negative things, even myself, right?
mm,
But the reality is probably not that bad, right? Probably health outcomes are probably better. Obesity is a thing of the past. Maybe certain other chronic diseases go out the window with it. Maybe we've figured out how to control certain aspects of global warming.
yeah,
Maybe the hurricanes don't hit us as severely in Florida anymore. I don't know. Like I don't know what humans are going to come up with, but
yeah,
I can't help but think it's probably going to be better. And so I think it's actually really noble of what did you say his name was? Peter Diamandis?
yeah.
It's really noble of him and people like him to control the narrative about technology and about the future. And I think it's also important just to inspire the next generation of artists and inventors and engineers and creators and builders that the future will be better and we should be optimistic about it and we should be excited for that for tomorrow because I do think it'll be better because we have I don't know 2000 years of data and so far it's up and to the right. So I don't know. At some what's the joke is on Wall Street, it's always, oh, don't worry, this time it's different. Like you're
Mm,
telling me every single human generation so far has lived better than their grandparents.
mm,
At some point, it's going to revert. Sorry,
yeah.
I don't know. I have a tough time believing that.
Oh man, we should actually do an episode on simulations of the future and compare or try to find good examples of like positive and negative ones and compare contrast. But I agree. I think more and more as I get older, I also recognize the importance of storytelling and to have just narratives that people can latch onto. Like how many of us were, yeah, how many children are so inspired by the stuff that they see, whether that's like in a cartoon, a film, or whatever it is, of like a future and orient their entire lives in order to make that happen, or at least part of their lives. Yeah, just to have that vision given to you at a young age, like this is what the future could be. And then, yeah, to have the courage to chase it as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, and I think it's sad that in the creative arts now, it's I can say at least for the art world, if you want to be taken seriously as an artist, you have to have art which is deliberately not
Mm,
beautiful, which is deliberately disturbing in some way or unnerving or whatever. And I'm not saying that kind of art doesn't have a place, it certainly does, but I just feel like many artists now feel like if they want to be taken seriously, it has to be this postmodern, very dark, macabre type
mm,
of thematic
mm.
through line. And I just don't know if that's certainly a clean break from what art used to be, which was the embodiment of beauty and the celebration of beauty. And I hope that there, at some level, aesthetics is upstream from all of this. And so I do hope at some level, like the aesthetics turn the corner and we start to see aesthetics which are happier and more cheerful and more optimistic. If you look at like the 1950s, look at something as simple as what color was everyone's car. I saw an interesting infographic where it was like cars used to come in all these different colors, bright red, bright yellow, bright blue, green, whatever. And then now, like most cars in the market are like black, white, gray, brown. Like
Minimalism has conquered the world.
yeah, it's you used to look at a diner. The old American diner used to be bright red leather booths and all these bright colors. A lot of the 1950s was really bright colors and this almost Jetsons like vision of the future and like futurism. You had like, brushed aluminum patterns and there was all this like color maxing, if you will. And then now we've converged on what I would call the Amex lounge aesthetic, which is basically just drab gray it's all just different shades of gray and it's sad and it's
Yeah.
not cheery at all and so I like to the extent that we can turn around that trend and make us be optimistic again in a design sense and then
Hmm.
hopefully that bleeds through to Hollywood and maybe we can have more movies and music and TV shows that are cheery and optimistic and excited and
Yeah.
maybe that just changes the vibe.
I'm blaming Apple for this. They went from their like colorful iMacs to these super sleek high-end design laptops, which come in all of those colors that you just mentioned, like space
Yeah,
gray.
it's just like,
That
yeah, it's just different shades of gray. I'm like, actually,
yeah.
this is one of my favorite things. And this is why I was so drawn to African art. And this is why I really love like art that comes out of Africa now, like contemporary African artists. If you look at like patterns of textiles and the design, if you ever look at like a Cameroonian wedding, it's just like this
Mm,
kaleidoscope of color, right? There's just all these incredibly bright colors that come together.
yeah.
And there's something so refreshing about that after looking at all these muted color palettes of these supposedly cool, hip places in the West. I don't know.
There we go, everyone. That is a calling card to introduce more color into the world in either metaphorically or literally. Positive note to leave everyone with.
Yeah. So
Yes,
yeah, on that note, I would conclude we should be color maxing.
we should be color maxing. Man, yeah, maxing. So that's a new thing that I need to get onto.
New Zoomer speak. This is Generation Z speak. It's always something maxing.
Yeah, yeah, I'm falling behind.
Have you
Color.
heard about the Chinese maxing? You heard about that one?
No.
Yeah, people, they're getting really excited with everything related to Chinese culture. So drinking hot water, listening to Chinese music, buying Chinese like traditional clothes. It's become a really big trend now among the youth, especially in the United States.
Okay, lots to say on this now. We should stop recording.
All right, John, it's been great talking to you. See you
Yeah,
next week.
see you.